Welcome to this short talk on relationships and family dynamics. As you know by now, this is a really important subject. This is the building block of our lives, is understanding what goes on in our families and which then creates what goes on in our relationships. Relationships are not only the source of our happiness, they're also the source of our success. And so it's essential for us to have a successful life is to learn some of these dynamics.
So there really is a strong connection between our lives and our relationships in our everyday lives and how it was with our families growing up. Family patterns need to be addressed at some point, and we talk about the relationship between our family dynamics and what's going on in our lives, because our families growing up, when we were growing up in our families, all the patterns, everything that happened to us, if they haven't been looked at, healed in some way, will affect us and run us in our everyday lives. So going back and dealing with what happened to us when we were growing up as children is really important, so that we can start to have new levels of success in our lives. For me personally, when I healed a lot of issues I had around my mother and my father and the grievances I had against them and what they did to me when I was growing up, have really, once I changed them, of course I have a better relationship with my parents and an understanding of what was going on for them when they were bringing me up. But also, most importantly, it has affected my life in terms of success and abundance. To be able to feel our parents and love our parents equally is one of the keys to an abundant life.
People often ask us in workshops and seminars, where all this stuff comes from, all this family stuff, relationship stuff comes from that we're looking at. And basically what it seems to be is there's this level of research that's come up recently where they've looked at the behavior of 6-month-old babies and they've done some play therapy with them. And while they do some play therapy with them, what they've identified is that the children always go to the toy that was the helper. And it seems to be the most basic human instinct that we have is to help, is to contribute, is to find that meaning in our life, even from a very young age. So when we first arrive into our families, our first desire is to help. And needless to say, when we look around our families and look at the levels of fusion, the levels of fight, the levels of dysfunction going on in our family, and the pain that so many people are in around us, we move off our centers. We step by step go into fusion and sacrifice to our families. And in each one of those steps, we give up on who we really are. And every one of us made this mistake. And that's all it is, it's a mistake. Because if we'd stayed in our centers and just shone and given our gifts, that would have made all the difference. But there was no one there to teach us. And our parents have made the same mistakes, and our parents have made the same mistake. So it was only natural that here we go, step by step, into fusion and sacrifice to our family. Now at some point, being in that amount of fusion and sacrifice makes our life difficult, because now basically we are trying to carry our family. We're doing that because on some level too, we also want them to love us. We want to be part of the family. So we create ourselves into what we think they want us to be. So we follow in their footsteps. We take on their pain. We take on their dysfunction. And it makes things difficult. And there are a number of models we can use to see how all this stuff works. And these models, we'll talk about 2 of them in this particular talk. And the first model in here is recognizing how our victim traps, how our sacrifice, how our fusion, how things that don't work for us in our lives come out of our relationship traps. They're in our marriages, in our work situations, all those kind of things. And those traps come out of our family traps. That's what happened to us when we were kids. the experience of our childhood and our families, if we don't heal ourselves, we will just recreate those in our present families. That's the blueprint. That's when our minds were programmed. And the feeling, like so often that we get in our relationship, where we feel trapped, for instance, in our marriages or trapped in our workplaces. Well, guess what? That's exactly how we felt as kids in our families. We felt trapped in our families. So none of those present feelings we have in our relationships is about now. That's exactly how we felt in our families. When we feel in sacrifice to our partner, well, guess what? That's how much sacrifice we felt in our family. So it's important for us to go back and have the courage to look at our family traps. What went wrong in the family when we were trying to help? And then, of course, underneath that is our unconscious traps, which we'll address in other modules. But in this module, we're just trying to explain how the connectivity of what's going on in our present world is actually a mirror and a reflection of what's happened to us as when we were kids. Now, of course, like most people, we've forgotten what happened. And so often in our seminars, people say, well, I don't remember. Well, of course you don't remember. We've repressed them. But notice how our relationships repeat. And it's that repetition, it's that the same block comes up time and time again. That's the programming out of our family. That's what we need to heal. That's what we need to get past. When we start learning about fusion and sacrifice, one of the common questions is people ask, they go, how do I know when I'm in fusion and sacrifice, and how do I know when I'm truly giving and bonded? And the simple answer is when you're giving and you're bonded, your life works. It's easy, you can achieve your goals, you're open-hearted, you're undefended, it's your experience of the world. So in sacrifice, as much as we try to help our families, as much as we try to carry them, the interesting thing is they never got any better. As much as we sacrificed ourselves for our family if they were fighting, they didn't stop fighting. They went on with their fighting. If they were unhappy, they stayed unhappy. So our sacrifice and giving up on ourselves didn't work. Not only did it not work, we also then took on all the pain. So we started carrying the pain and that sense of failure and all the guilt that we carry out of our family. Now when we look at them, we start saying, the reason they're unhappy, the reason they're fighting, the reason whatever's going on is because of me. I didn't stop that. I was supposed to help and I didn't stop. So we carry the guilt of that and also the heartbreak of having given up on ourselves and feeling the pain of what was going on in our families. Now most of us at some point, recognizing this burden, this level of guilt, this level of dysfunction, we need a strategy. We need to get out of there. So typically most of us, our strategy was run, become dissociated, go independent. I don't need parents. I'm going to go off and raise myself. Nobody's going to tell me what to do from now on. Even if I'm physically still here, mentally I've already left. So we start distancing ourselves from what we see as the source of our pain, from our parents. And it creates this separation. And in that separation, we feel now we can escape it. But independence doesn't escape it. Independence just goes into dissociation. Underneath in our subconscious and unconscious mind, we still carry all this pain. We carry all these grievances. We carry all the remembrance of all these things that happen. Just because we moved town or moved away doesn't mean it's gone. And that brings us to our second model. First is that level of our surface mind thing, which we look out onto the world and we think, each day we're going to get up and it's going to be a new day and not like the day before and our relationships are all going to be better. That's the surface mind. But what we don't realize is underneath the surface mind It's all about relationships. It's about our relationships to others. Every problem is a relationship problem. At the heart of everything that goes wrong in our life, guess what? There's usually someone else there, because it's a relationship problem. And then our relationship to others, of course, is just a replay of our relationship to our families. So we can't escape them. We can't move to another country. We can't not speak to them and think it's going to be okay, and that we can just live in our surface mind. Because underneath there's all this other stuff going on. And it's going on 24 hours of every day. Just because we're in our conscious mind doesn't mean this stuff is not affecting us. And of course, underneath all this baggage that we carry is our true nature, our higher mind, us as spirit. So it's essential for us at some point that if we want to achieve that place of peace and grace and higher mindedness, we need to work through all these patterns, all these family issues, all these relationships issues with other people. So we do need to give up our independence, because our independence is not going to save us. It's just going to polarize us. Now, many people think independent people are really tough guys. You know, they've got their life sorted. No, no, no. Independent people are just well defended. And where you're well defended, you're defended against your heart, you're defended against the good things, as well as all the bad things you're trying to defend against. So at some point we need to win our courage back and make that journey back through that process. Now, we're going to have to do it anyway. And you can choose whether you go back and do it with your family that you grew up with, or in your present relationships, if you want them to work, or your relationship with your children. And they're all connected. So it's just a matter of choice of where we start and when we get on with it.
For me, in my relationships, in my everyday life, they are a complete reflection and mirror for me about what is going on for me and my relationship to myself. Every relationship I have in my life is a reflection being thrown back at me, something to teach me about myself. So the more I choose to heal fights and competitions or relationship problems, the more I get closer to who I really am and my true nature. And it's through my ability to be in relationship with others that I start to feel a relationship to what we call our higher mind, our divine nature, for want of a better word. So everything is connected, whether we want to be aware of it or not. How we relate here and now in our everyday relationships has an effect on our relationship to others, yes, our relationship to ourselves, but most importantly, it is through our ability to relate in this moment in time that we learn to relate to our higher nature. You know, what is true about life. And we can start to open our hearts to being in relationship with life just as it is.
And I think for me, one of the things, the mistake that I made in the early stages of my marriage was that I didn't work on my relationship. You know, I thought relationships just happened. You know, you got married and you lived happily ever after. That's just not the way it goes. We need to work on our relationship. We need to learn about the stages of relationship. We need to learn about ourselves and how to give ourselves at higher and higher levels. So many people, you know, they don't work on their relationships, and then they really wonder why later they don't work. And it just seems there isn't this full understanding of the importance of relationships in our everyday life. In a relationship, sometimes the question comes up, is the level of commitment in the relationship. One of the things we often ask in our seminars is, you know, how committed are you in your relationship? And so often people will come 50%, 60%, something like that. But the truth is, if you want a relationship to work, it's got to be a minimum of 100%. We need to commit so often When we got married, obviously that was an act of commitment, or we started a significant relationship. That's a commitment. But we need to learn to do it every day, to commit and keep committing time and time again. How many times do you need to commit to make a relationship work? Thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. Commitment is a powerful healing tool that we need to use in relationships. It's a thing that'll get us through the worst stages of our independence. Now, all of us at some stage in our relationships are going to hit places of sacrifice. You're going to feel trapped. You're going to feel like you don't have your own life in a relationship. You don't feel like you can be who you want to be in that relationship. And of course, as we said before, that's all stuff that came out of our childhoods. That's exactly as we felt in our families growing up. And so we do need to have that awareness that when these issues come up, it's not about getting caught in the fight. It's not about running away. It's not about being passively aggressive. Because none of those things will work. All they'll do is just lock the pattern in. We just need to recognize we're on a healing path, a transformational path, and start learning methods, learning practices to make our relationships better, so that you can go on building step by step better and better relationships. Now naturally, when something goes wrong with your partner and the pain hits your mind, well, none of us behave really badly when that happens. None of us behave really well when that happens. But it's just to have the courage to, once we've come out the other side of those emotions, to sit down and go, okay, now it's time for me to go back and see what it is that I need to heal. Learn how I can give myself at higher and higher levels. Because that's what relationships are. The purpose of a relationship is to learn to give and receive. If you make your relationship about taking in any way, then your relationship will not work. Every fight you have in your relationship is basically because you've been trying to take and you're not getting your needs met. And that's the same with sacrifice. Sacrifice on the surface looks like you're giving in 10,000 different ways. But deep down inside, under all that giving, there's still, you're trying to take something. You're trying to take your parents' approval. You're trying to take their recognition. You're trying to compete with your brothers and sisters, and often the parent of the opposite sex, for a feeling of inclusion, a feeling of recognition, a feeling of love, a feeling of caring. All the things that came out of our childhood that were at the heart of the lost bonding. All these things are about recreating the bonding, recreating that sense of self that we need to learn about in our relationships. And if without that bonding, our lives are going to be difficult, they're going to become dysfunctional, and they're going to be the source of our pain rather than the source of our joy.